In a tale filled with drama and consequences, the story begins with an entitled neighbor, whom we will refer to as Karen. She is accompanied by her reckless son, known as Entitled Son. There is also a previous owner of our house, referred to as P.O., who, while having a limited role in this narrative, plays a part in the unfolding events. The journey spans almost 15 years from when we bought the house, leading to a series of significant incidents that ultimately reveal the consequences of Karen's actions. To appreciate the unfolding drama fully, it is vital to understand the background. Most of the events occurred before we purchased and settled into our new home. Karen owned a large piece of land located down the road from a well-known recreational lake. Although it may sound close, the distance was considerable. The road where Karen lived was the only access point to multiple lakefront properties, resorts, and the most popular boat dock in the area. Consequently, while the homes were not extremely costly, there were several very valuable properties further down the road, frequently visited by wealthy individuals. Karen's wealth allowed her to subdivide her vast property into 4 roughly equal sections when her children reached adulthood. She gifted one section to her daughter, who turned out to be a fairly decent person despite her family's troublesome behavior. Another section was given to Entitled Son, for whom she built a house according to his preferences. The last piece, which did not have a residential property, was utilized to construct a small convenience store, a detail that will become relevant later in the narrative. To prevent potential future conflicts, Karen decided to grant the deeds of the homes and properties to her children. This move would soon reveal its implications. While her respectable daughter managed her responsibilities well, Entitled Son turned into a party-loving troublemaker. His disruptive behavior became a nightmare for the neighborhood, as he would frequently host loud parties late into the night, keeping many residents awake. The police were often called to address his antics, implying that they had a presence nearby due to the frequency of complaints. Entitled Son's spoiled nature was reflected in the fact that his mother handled all the household expenses. The bills for water, electricity, and garbage were all addressed to her, except for one crucial detail, the property tax. Since the property was legally in his name, he was responsible for this tax, which he neglected to pay. It is unclear whether he simply ignored this obligation or believed it was being taken care of for him. Eventually, it was no surprise when the authorities visited his home, but the real shock came when he failed to return, leading to his house being placed up for auction. The state of the house at this time was alarming. The property was in dire disrepair, with holes in the drywall and a significant gap in the living room floor that descended into the garage or basement. The kitchen's flooring and subflooring required complete replacement, while the walls were marred by mud. This level of deterioration rendered the house unlivable, according to the bank's standards. Consequently, the only individuals capable of purchasing the property were those able to pay in cash. Enter P.O., the previous owner, who had taken a different path after selling his former home. He was not a highly successful house flipper as seen on television, but rather a retired individual who engaged in flipping houses as a hobby to keep himself busy. P.O. would find houses like this one at auctions, buy them for a low price, renovate them himself, and then sell them for a profit. While transforming the neglected house, he lived off the earnings from the eventual sale. His venture was driven by a passion for revitalizing properties and, unbeknownst to him, would lead to a significant climax in this ongoing saga involving Karen and her entitled offspring. The process of living off the profits from the previous house usually followed a familiar pattern. By the time he had finished fixing one house and was ready to buy the next, his profits would often be nearly gone. Any remaining money would go into an emergency savings fund, which he considered to be nothing out of the ordinary. We found ourselves in the market for a new home, but our budget limited us from purchasing anything too pricey. Then, one day, we discovered a listing for a property on a website that seemed to be the perfect fit. It was the right size, located in a great neighborhood, and conveniently close to the lake where we enjoyed fishing and boating. It appeared to be almost perfect, at least from what we could see online. However, we were apprehensive about the price, which was not yet displayed on the website. Still, we figured it wouldn't hurt to take a look at the property in person, so we drove by to check it out. To our surprise, we found the owner, whom we learned was named Poe, working on the house. We decided to stop and introduce ourselves, engaging in friendly conversation. When we inquired about the price, Poe explained that he was in the process of renovating the house with plans to sell it eventually. He mentioned that his realtor had added the listing to the website's database for efficiency, even though the house was not on the market yet. During our chat, we found Poe to be very approachable and enjoyed his company. We expressed our interest in buying the house, offering a reasonable price based on its current state and the work he had already completed, which was about 50% finished. We made it clear that we would love to complete the renovations and make it our forever home. However, Po declined our offer, explaining that he had already received several other offers and didn't feel right selling it to us at that moment. He suggested we could purchase it at the full price once he had finished the renovations. We thanked him graciously and left our contact information, asking him to reach out if he ever changed his mind, to which he promised he would. A little less than 2 weeks later, we received a surprise phone call from Po. He informed us that his sister had fallen ill in another state and that he wanted to be with her. Unfortunately, this left him without enough time or patience to complete the renovations on the house. He explained that while the property was not up to code, he would be willing to sell it to us for a reasonable price if we could find a way to make the purchase. We were thrilled at the opportunity and quickly began searching for banks that would assist us with the financing. Thanks to connections from a realtor friend, we were able to find a bank willing to loan us the money to buy the house, albeit with a few conditions. We had a strict timeline of 2 weeks to bring the house up to code, otherwise, the bank could default on the loan and potentially auction off the property. After discussing the situation with Po, he generously offered to help us in any way he could. While he couldn't physically do any work on the house due to his urgent circumstances, he provided us with detailed instructions on what needed to be done to meet the minimum code requirements, including the estimated time, effort, and costs involved. Additionally, Po suggested a unique arrangement. We could take out a loan for twice the amount he wanted for the house, and he would give us back the extra money to help with repairs. We agreed to this plan, knowing that the house was close to meeting code due to the work he had already completed. While we could have tackled some of the work ourselves, we decided to bring in a few friends to assist us, enabling us to complete the necessary renovations in half the expected time. After successfully bringing the house up to code, we still faced plenty of projects that needed addressing. Over the next several months, we worked tirelessly on replacing the flooring and subflooring, rewiring electrical components, patching holes in the walls, and removing old, peeling wallpaper that was literally decomposing and stuck to the drywall. We dedicated a significant amount of effort into transforming the house into a welcoming space that we could finally call home. When the time came to move into our dream home, we were excited, even if there were still a few lingering issues we planned to fix gradually. It felt like a significant achievement, and we couldn't wait to settle in. Just as we were in the middle of moving our belongings, a woman named Anne stopped by to introduce herself. Po had given us several warnings about Anne's entitled behavior, raising our curiosity about her character. Initially, Anne seemed incredibly friendly, and we were caught off guard, wondering why Po had cautioned us about her. Po had warned us about her numerous times, but we never expected it to end up like this. As we were finishing our conversation, she spoke to us gently but firmly, explaining that the house we had been living in actually belonged to her. She informed us that we had 30 days to move out. Although she expressed sympathy for our situation and the fact that we had been scammed, she insisted that the house was rightfully hers and that Po had no authority to sell it to us in the first place. Hearing this was terrifying. We had invested so much time, effort, and money into making this place our dream home. The thought of losing it so suddenly felt like a nightmare, especially because we had fallen victim to a scam. After she explained the situation, we thanked her for clarifying things and for her kindness during such a difficult conversation. We told her we would contact the bank and Po to sort everything out. We immediately reached out to the bank, which confirmed that Po was indeed the legal owner of the deed. We then spoke to the realtor, who supported the same claim. Finally, we contacted Po, who shared his side of the story, detailing how everyone accused him of stealing the house multiple times after he bought it at auction. He described the harassment he faced from her regarding the property. Every person we spoke to seemed to tell the same story, which only added to our confusion. We even visited the courthouse, where we found our name on the deed, confirming our ownership of the house. This journey led us to learn more about her story from several neighbors, who shared the backstory surrounding the situation. Not long after, she approached us and asked when we could expect to be out of the house. We explained that moving out was not an option since we were the legal owners and it was not our fault that she lost the property. We expressed our empathy regarding her loss, understanding that it must have been painful for her to lose a family property because of her son's mistakes. However, we made it clear that we wouldn't simply give up the home we had purchased with our own hard-earned money. She then launched into a detailed account about how this house had been in her family for generations, explaining her deep attachment to it. She claimed that Po had stolen it from them during a time of confusion, particularly when her child was facing legal troubles. We were puzzled and asked why they hadn't just bid on the property when it went to auction. After all, we had bought the house for around $50,000, and even with the improvements we had made, it was still possible for them to reclaim it at an auction for a reasonable price. Her answer was that they felt the house was being stolen from them and refused to pay for something they believed should be rightfully theirs. We felt compassion for her situation but reiterated that we couldn't take a loss on something we had invested so much into. We offered to sell the house back to her at a price of $100,000. Considering the location and the repairs we had made, this was already a fair deal, as it was just over half of the house's actual market value. After purchasing it from PO for $50,000 and putting in another $30,000 on renovations, we considered it a reasonable offer. Although we didn't mention it, we would have been open to negotiating down to $90,000 if it meant reaching an agreement. She quickly countered with an offer of $40,000, insisting she shouldn't have to pay anything for what she believed was rightfully hers. When we rejected that low offer, she tried to negotiate by saying she understood the effort we had put in and would generously add an extra $10,000 for the expenses we incurred while fixing up the house. When we reminded her that we purchased it for $50,000 from PO, she became upset, calling us liars and thieves. The whole situation felt surreal, as we struggled to understand her perspective while navigating our own legal rights to the property. The situation escalated when the woman who came to view our house made a harsh statement, bluntly declaring that the house was a complete dump. Her tone suggested that there was absolutely no way our beloved home was worth the asking price. This wasn't just a casual comment, it was a personal attack on something we had invested so much time, effort, and resources into. We had put our blood, sweat, and tears into making this place our dream home, not to mention the significant amounts of money spent on renovations and improvements. Her insults crossed a line, and we reached a breaking point. We firmly asked her to leave, stating clearly that she was no longer welcome in our home. We made it known that even if she offered us double the market value for the house, we would refuse to sell it to her. Predictably, she did not take this rejection well. As she stormed out, she hurled a flurry of insults and angry remarks our way, clearly upset that we wouldn't entertain her offer. After her departure, we soon learned that she had begun spreading all sorts of unfounded rumors about us throughout the neighborhood. She claimed that we had somehow stolen the house from her, among other ridiculous accusations. Initially, we chose to ignore these rumors, convinced that no one would actually take her seriously. However, our calm was shattered when an unfamiliar man drove into our driveway, visibly agitated and brandishing a gun. This man was a self-proclaimed peacekeeper of the neighborhood, known for confronting anyone who stirred up trouble. Although we had never met him, we had heard stories about his role in the community. Most residents held him in high regard, appreciating his efforts to maintain safety and peace in a rural area where some people did not always follow the law. He had a reputation for being reasonable and effective. Our neighborhood is divided into two distinct sections. One section is primarily made up of older retirees, creating a friendly and harmonious atmosphere. The other section, deeper in the wilderness, is home to less law-abiding individuals. We live on the edge of the peaceful area, about a mile away from the chaos, set apart by stretches of woodland and farmland. Knowing this about the neighborhood, we decided to approach the situation calmly. We told Mr. Peacekeeper that we were unaware of any issues and invited him inside for a beer and an open conversation. We also informed him that while he could bring his gun, we would have ours as well. In our town, it is quite common for people to own guns. There are more gun stores than dollar stores, which illustrates the local culture surrounding firearm ownership. Mr. Peacekeeper accepted our invitation, and after a few hours of discussing the situation, he admitted that he had gotten swept up in the rumors. He expressed his regrets for jumping to conclusions and assured us that he would be more cautious in the future. He also expressed gratitude that we had purchased the house, noting that when the previous owner moved out, the neighborhood became much quieter. He no longer had to listen to loud music or deal with drunken teens stumbling down the road at night, a situation that had caused much annoyance for residents. We shared a laugh about our experiences and he left our home without further incident. This encounter, however, shed light on why Mr. Peacekeeper had believed the rumors without question. It ties into a side story that significantly influenced the unfolding events. The former owner, who had split off a quarter of her property to build a convenience store, had initially created quite a stir in the neighborhood. The store became extremely popular, primarily due to its location, though not because of its prices or customer service. In fact, they were known for overcharging customers substantially, with a customer service approach that was limited to just a simple, "Thank you for your purchase," as people left. As you stepped outside, there were times when the store would offer a refund if you found mold on the food you had just purchased from them, which was a nice gesture. This convenience store became quite popular, mainly because it was the only one within miles. For those who needed to buy groceries but didn't want to drive all the way into town, it was a short walk away for most people. In fact, we often set aside our differences and shopped there frequently. After all, the store was literally next door to our home. Their small store gained a strong reputation in the neighborhood, and it was a positive one at that. Everyone wanted to support their little shop, and they would stand up against anyone who might try to take it away. I could understand why people felt that way, especially during a time when most folks believed that Anne and her family were genuinely good-hearted people. However, when rumors started circulating about Anne, people seemed to listen more closely. There were outrageous claims about her stealing an entire house, which everyone dismissed as nonsense, but generally, people still had faith in her. There were certainly other rumors floating around too, and trust me, there were plenty of them. Most of these were just minor and petty, things that nobody really found important enough to mention. Even if you assumed all the gossip surrounding us was true, there was plenty more that could be said about other people in the neighborhood. So, no one paid too much attention to those rumors. Despite this, others chose to keep their distance from us because Anne clearly had a problem with us, and no one wanted to risk incurring her wrath or being banned from her store. As a result, we were left alone to do our own thing. After a number of years had passed, S finally got out of prison. With nowhere else to turn, he moved back in. Anne didn't want him living with her mother, so she rented him an apartment above the store, but she made it perfectly clear that there were to be no wild parties on her property ever again. S didn't have to pay rent. Instead, he was supposed to run the store when she and her family were busy with other matters, which wasn't too often. Despite this arrangement, it was clear that S hadn't learned his lesson. While he worked the register, he often charged customers twice for items and pocketed the extra money. We noticed this on several occasions and went back for refunds, but they always claimed the cash register was malfunctioning. When we approached Anne to inform her that her son was double charging customers and likely keeping the extra cash for himself, we expected some acknowledgement of the issue. Even though Anne could be quite entitled, we believed she wouldn't overlook something so illegal. We liked her store and didn't want anything bad to happen to it. However, instead of showing gratitude for our concern, she dismissed us as if we were imagining things and nicely told us to leave her alone. We complied with her request but decided it was important to share this information with a few friends in the neighborhood. Over the years, we had slowly started to rebuild our relationships with some of the neighbors. Bringing Christmas treats every year helped brighten their days, and eventually, they began to acknowledge us. Our friends expressed their thanks for the information, though they admitted they didn't fully believe it. Nevertheless, news spread quickly through the community. Not long after, Mr. Peacekeeper paid us a visit again. This time, he was friendlier. He didn't buy into the rumors surrounding us, knowing most of them were false. Since then, we had spoken to him several times, mostly in a friendly manner rather than serious discussions. He would stop by for a beer from time to time, chatting casually about things happening in the neighborhood and asking us for our opinions on various matters. He made a point to connect with everyone, checking in with most people at least once a year to keep up with what was going on around. At least once a year, it was important for him to stay informed about what was happening in the neighborhood. He wanted to ensure that things remained peaceful and free from trouble. The presence of police officers made him uncomfortable, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He aimed to perform their duties more effectively, hoping that his efforts would lessen the need for a police presence. This arrangement worked well for everyone involved, especially parents, as it meant they could allow their children to walk to the nearby lake without adult supervision, even in areas that were considered less safe. However, he was not pleased about the rumors circulating about our neighbors and their small shop. He made it clear that he had already spoken with the shop owners, who insisted that any issues were simply misunderstandings related to errors at the register. He urged us to stop spreading rumors to avoid creating further problems. Despite our desire to present evidence supporting our claims, we suspected he would dismiss it anyway. He had a tendency to trust the shop owners and their explanation, regarding it as a simple mistake, leaving us feeling helpless in our attempt to convince him otherwise. In an effort to keep the peace, we agreed with him and expressed our regret for any trouble caused. We explained that our intentions were genuine, stemming from a desire to protect the few friends we had made in the community. He accepted our apology, delivered a final warning, and departed without saying much more. From that moment, we decided to stop shopping at their store, only returning if absolutely necessary. As time passed, things took a different turn. The rumors we had initially pointed out continued to circulate throughout the neighborhood. Despite Mr. Peacekeeper's efforts to counter those rumors by informing every resident that they were unfounded and rooted in our property dispute with the store owners, the community began to pay closer attention to their receipts. The residents noticed the same patterns of discrepancies that we had previously highlighted, leading them to realize that the shop owners had likely been pocketing extra money for some time. It became clear that the owners were aware of the situation but chose to ignore it, attempting instead to silence anyone who spoke out against them through the spread of rumors. In small-town stores like this one, the success of the business heavily relies on the support of local customers. During the warmer months, when tourists flocked to the area for vacation, the shop made considerable profits. However, these profits were insufficient to sustain the business through the cold winter months. Eventually, Mr. Peacekeeper connected the dots regarding the shop's wrongful practices, and his anger was palpable. We could hear his loud voice arguing with the shop owners from next door, expressing his frustration and disappointment. It was a moment of great satisfaction for us, witnessing him stand up for what was right. That very same day, Mr. Peacekeeper took it upon himself to visit every house in the neighborhood, sharing information about the shop's wrongdoings with everyone he encountered. He brought along a collection of receipts to provide proof to anyone who wanted to see it. Mr. Peacekeeper was a figure of trust in the community, more so than the shop owners, and within just 24 hours, he had effectively ruined their business. The neighborhood, once a steady source of customers for the shop, turned its back, and the owners quickly found themselves in trouble. Throughout the summer months, they still attracted some vacationers and seasonal visitors who were unaware of the growing negativity surrounding the shop. However, as winter set in and those crowds diminished, the shop began to experience severe financial losses. After 2 harsh winters, the owners were forced to close their doors for the season. This closure meant throwing away over 90% of their stock each fall, only to restock with fresh inventory every spring. Such a practice was clearly not sustainable, and the shop ultimately shut down entirely after 3 more years. As their reputation in the neighborhood continued to decline, people began to show us more respect. We found ourselves making new friends without having to fight against a negative perception. The community stopped viewing us as outsiders and started treating us like valued members of the neighborhood. Yet, this marked only the beginning of the downfall for the shop owners. To fully understand the climax of this story, a bit more background is necessary. This narrative may be expanding beyond its original bounds, but it is essential to grasp the full context surrounding these events. The situation with our neighbor has become quite complicated, primarily due to her extremely intrusive nature. It feels as though we cannot even step outside our own home without her watching us closely from behind her window. Anytime we decide to take a walk outside, go for a stroll around our property, or even do something as simple as picking up the lawn or walking her dog, she finds a reason to be outside as well. Whether she is pulling weeds or tending to her garden, it is almost guaranteed that she will be out there, casting her watchful gaze upon us. We are not hiding anything that warrants such scrutiny, but the truth is that we are not on the best terms with her. It is simply uncomfortable to have someone observe our every move. We have plans to set up a small pool and a hot tub in our backyard, and the last thing we want is for her to be watching us while we are trying to relax in our bathing suits. This invasion of privacy has driven us to consider installing a privacy fence, which we believe would provide us with the seclusion we desire. In an effort to maintain a neighborly relationship, we approached her kindly to inform her of our plans to put up a fence. However, she reacted with outright rejection. In response, we made it clear that the fence would indeed be going up. Despite her objections, we aimed to handle the situation delicately, offering to discuss the specifics of the fence, including the color and design, so that she would not have to endure looking at something she might consider unattractive all the time. Since it seems to be her favorite pastime to gaze into our yard, we believed it was important to find common ground. Despite the challenges she has presented us with, we still strive to be good neighbors. To avoid any disputes regarding the placement of the fence, we decided to set it up a foot within our property line, ensuring clarity about boundaries. This planning took place prior to another significant event in our lives, which was the release of someone from jail. With a desire for transparency, we made a trip to the courthouse to obtain a copy of the deed and a map outlining our property lines. To our astonishment, we discovered that a substantial portion, nearly a third, of our property was being claimed by her. It was surprising to find out that she had a shed situated on that land, along with a garden. The layout of our property is not a standard rectangular shape like many properties in other areas, rather, it resembles a half hexagon or a trapezoid. Such irregular property lines are not uncommon where we live, which adds to the complexity of the situation. A line of trees traverses part of our property, creating a triangular section according to the deed. However, the presence of those trees has inadvertently made the section appear square. Our neighbor believes that the area beyond the trees belongs to her. Upon approaching her with the information we found, she reacted with hostility, accusing us of lying and stealing what she considered to be her property. Although we had lived there for years under the impression that it truly belonged to her, we were willing to let go of our claims to resolve the conflict peacefully. To ensure everyone's comfort, we even offered to sell her that portion of land or propose a trade for a section of her property that connected to ours. That portion of her land was particularly inconvenient for us to maintain. Expanding it would have significantly reduced the hassle and provided us with more room for the plans we had in mind. Unfortunately, she outright rejected our offer, insisting that she would never pay for what she believed was already hers and that she would not consider giving us any of her property in exchange. In her eyes, we were the thieves who had stolen from her. Since that confrontation, we have been caught in a prolonged property dispute. Living in a rural area, as I've mentioned, means that property lines can often be complicated and unclear. Many deeds in our region are centuries old and reference landmarks that no longer exist, such as large oak trees or specific rocks next to streams. Some of these features may have vanished long ago, leaving property lines open to interpretation. Given these circumstances, it is fair to say that property disputes are quite common in our area. This situation, combined with the reality that even small portions of land can become quite valuable, has led our state to implement strict laws and regulations addressing property disputes. Regulations that govern property disputes play a crucial role in maintaining fairness in land ownership and boundaries. These laws exist to provide a structure for how property lines are established and what recourse a landowner has if a dispute arises. A noteworthy case that illustrates the significance of these regulations occurred just a few years back when a small landowner successfully fought against a large corporation over a mere 0.1 acres of land. This dispute not only resulted in a victory for the individual but also earned him over $1 million, highlighting how property disputes can have significant financial implications. In the context of personal property lines, our situation is relatively straightforward. The boundaries were set by the previous owner, ensuring clarity. However, this simplicity does not negate the importance of strict legal standards that govern property disputes, especially those involving surveyors. Surveyors are professionals tasked with measuring and mapping land, and their work is critical in resolving disputes. Unfortunately, the potential for conflict arises when a surveyor is tempted by bribes from large corporations that stand to lose millions of dollars over small pieces of land. If a surveyor were to act dishonestly, it creates an unfair disadvantage for the rightful landowner. To prevent such abuses, laws in our state impose severe consequences on surveyors who provide inaccurate measurements, even if the mistake was unintentional. If a surveyor issues a faulty survey report, they can face hefty fines and risk losing their license, which would bar them from practicing in the state again. Additionally, they are required to inform all their clients from the past 10 years about the error and must refund their fees. Clients also have the option to request a new survey from a different, non-affiliated surveyor, with all costs covered by the original surveyor. This places a significant burden on the surveyor to maintain accuracy and integrity in their work. If surveyors are found to be involved in bribery or blackmail, the penalties widen, as they become liable for all damages and compensation owed to affected parties. These strict regulations serve to protect landowners and dissuade surveyors from engaging in unethical practices. As a result, surveyors in our area tend to shy away from any involvement in disputed properties. When we found ourselves needing a surveyor, we quickly realized that it would not be as simple as just making a phone call. It also came with unexpected costs that put us in a difficult position. Our situation took a turn for the worse when it appeared that the property line measurements given to us were influenced by our neighbor. It seemed she managed to persuade the surveyor to provide measurements that inaccurately reflected our property boundaries, except for one small section that was supposedly left out. This oversight is particularly concerning as it suggests that there may have been communication about the property line that she did not disclose. To complicate matters, our neighbor frequently introduces herself to any surveyor we approach, letting them know that her property has already been surveyed. She insinuates that there may be a dispute, which makes any surveyor hesitant to take on our case, fearing the repercussions of a potential legal battle. Additionally, before we moved into our home, we discovered that the markers established by the bank surveyor mysteriously disappeared, leaving us without clear indications of our property lines. This incident raises questions about the integrity of the surveying process and adds to our frustrations, as we are now left to navigate this complex and costly situation. Currently, hiring a surveyor seems almost as expensive as the value of the land itself, and the quotes we've received thus far are outrageous. It is evident that surveyors are well aware of the risks involved in taking on disputed properties, and they set their prices accordingly. Nevertheless, we are actively saving money in hopes of hiring a surveyor who can help clarify the boundaries of our property. Fast forward to just a few months ago when our situation reached a pivotal moment. The backstory is crucial for understanding the challenges we have faced, and now we are ready to unfold the main event that has brought us to the present day. A few months ago, our area experienced a severe storm that resulted in significant damage. During this storm, a large tree located on a disputed piece of property fell over. This tree was positioned right next to the road, and when it crashed down, it not only caused destruction to a portion of our neighbor's property, the one who lives directly across the street from us, but it also totaled a brand new sports car belonging to someone who was driving down the road at that moment. Fortunately, no one suffered any injuries during this chaotic incident. However, the aftermath required extensive cleanup efforts, which stretched over several days. During this period, we received an alarming bill in the mail, amounting to over $200,000, which was astonishingly more than the value of our home and property, even after we had made improvements. To provide a bit of context for those who might not be familiar, most property or home insurance policies typically do not cover damages to someone else's property. In situations where damage occurs to public property, such as a road, it is generally the homeowner's responsibility if the damage could have been prevented. For example, if there was a tree next to the road that could have been cut down to prevent it from falling during a bad storm, the homeowner would be held fully accountable for the damages inflicted by that fallen tree. This is how things work in our locality. Upon receiving the hefty bill from the insurance company representing a wealthy individual whose sports car was damaged, we decided to reach out to them. We explained kindly that the tree that fell had not been on their property. The insurance representatives asked us a series of questions and indicated that they would conduct an investigation into the matter. About a week later, we received another letter from them, and this time it included a copy of the property deed along with a printout of the property lines. The tree in question was clearly marked in red, indicating that it was indeed on our property. They demanded full payment within 30 days from the date of their initial notice, warning us that failure to comply would lead to legal action. At this point, roughly 2 weeks had passed since we received the bill. We contacted the insurance company again and reiterated that the tree was not on their client's property. The agent we spoke with initially argued with us, using more polite language to suggest that anyone who believed the tree was not on our property would have to be brain dead. They insisted that no one could possibly think it was that far off the marked property line. In response to their insistence, we provided them with the contact information for the surveyor we had hired to determine the property lines. The agent sighed and said they would reach out to the surveyor to investigate the matter further, but they emphasized that we had only about 2 weeks left to prepare for payment if our claims could not be verified. After that communication, we did not receive any updates from the insurance company. It was crucial to remember the potential consequences for providing false survey results. Even if the surveyor had been offered a bribe, it was highly unlikely that he would risk his career and reputation to alter his findings. The possible repercussions for him would be severe, likely forcing him to leave the country. Therefore, there was no chance he would provide any information to the insurance company that contradicted what he had already reported to us. Later, we decided to reach out to the insurance company again to check on the status of our case. The agent we spoke with seemed quite pleased as they read through the notes on the case. Although they could not disclose too much information due to confidentiality policies, they did inform us that the claim was still under dispute. They mentioned that the claim was being challenged similarly to how we had contested it, stating that the property in question did not belong to their insured client. They also confirmed that the surveyor verified his findings with them. Given that we were not disputing the survey results and that the surveyor was hired by their client, there was no reason for the insurance company to see the results as false. Thus, according to their understanding, all responsibility for the damages caused by the fallen tree should rest on their policyholder. While they could not give us any more specifics, we were satisfied with this outcome. It was about what we had anticipated. As you can likely gather from this backstory, we found ourselves in a position where we did not have any major issue with the idea of paying the amount demanded by the insurance company, although it was clear they were not thrilled about it. The situation was resolving itself, and we were relieved that the truth had prevailed. We do not know the exact amount of money they may have saved or currently possess, but it appears that they had sufficient funds to settle their financial obligations without needing to sell additional pieces of their land. Since that time, we have generally remained silent regarding the ongoing property dispute, yet we are still seriously contemplating the idea of saving money to hire a surveyor to help us reclaim our land. At this stage, the issue extends beyond just the physical land itself. It has become a matter of principle for us. In terms of our relationship with her, it is clear that her feelings towards us have changed. Whenever she looks in our direction, it is evident that she is not pleased with us at all. She seems to harbor some resentment, despite the fact that we allowed her to use our land. It is puzzling that she would complain about receiving land for free, as one might think she would be grateful for it. At this juncture, she might attempt to start rumors about us, but such actions would likely backfire. We have developed friendships with a significant portion of our neighbors. And they have lost trust in her since they discovered that she had been stealing from everyone in the community while other neighbors simply stood by and watched without intervening. Now, she finds herself in a difficult position, and we are content to sit back and witness the chaos she has created around her. For those of you who are interested in a lighter subject, we recently made the choice to install an invisible dog fence in our yard, as we were considering getting a privacy fence but couldn't afford one at the moment. For anyone unfamiliar with this type of containment system, it involves burying a small electrical wire underground and placing a special collar on the dog. If the dog approaches the boundary, the collar emits a beep that the dog finds unpleasant. If the dog continues to proceed past the barrier, the collar delivers a very mild shock. We were initially hesitant about using shock collars, so one of us even tested it by walking across the boundary. The sensation was noticeable but not painful, it felt more like a slight tingle. It is important to properly condition the dogs to the beep sound before allowing them to roam freely, so ideally, they would only hear the beep and turn back, never experiencing the shock. Our goal was to give our dogs some freedom to explore the yard rather than keeping them cooped up indoors all day. We had strategically placed the wire well within our property lines, especially to prevent any of our dogs from approaching her property. In a funny twist, she accidentally ran over our invisible boundary with her lawnmower, even though the wire was positioned over 5 feet away from her claimed property line. This incident taught everyone that electric lawnmowers do not react well with electrified wires. Her mower ended up completely damaged, and she had to buy a new one due to her decision to ignore our markers. The best part was that since the wire was well onto our property, she could not hold us responsible for the damage. Although she did attempt to spread rumors about the incident, they did not gain much traction. It would have been absurd for her to blame us, and she must have known better than to ask us to replace her mower. In closing, I hope you enjoyed this story. I have another interesting situation to share about how my mother's actions led to a significant financial loss for her company, causing her entire department to shut down permanently. It's getting late now, so I will write that story tomorrow or soon. Keep an eye out for it.